everybody. Welcome to our video question and answer session with viewers. I've been doing these and they're so fun, and I'm meeting everybody across the country, which is amazing. And so Dana is our viewer from Connecticut. And as she was saying before we started taping officially, that she feels like she's talking to an old friend. And that's kind of what's fun is I've seen everybody commenting on videos, or I've interchanged emails with people. And so it's really fun to get to see faces and like officially formally meet people. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
So well, you have 3 questions for me today. What is your first question?
My first question is, it seems like right now that the most common when someone comes in to make arrangements, it's either a traditional burial or cremation. And do you think it's going to be many, many generations before natural burial is going to be that third option that's always going to be, like when people come in, it's going to be traditional burial, cremation, or natural burial? It's going to be number 3 right on the list.
You know, I think eventually, because burial is the disposition. So it's the path of service essentially to get there, whether you do a big viewing with embalming and everything, or whether you do like maybe a private family viewing and then burial, or just meet at the cemetery to do that natural burial. So I think it depends on availability. And I think that's the biggest, is that not so much even consumers, it's funeral homes taking the initiative and showing a shroud, showing a natural burial casket along with the other burial caskets, and really presenting that option front and center rather than making a family ask for it almost. And so I think that's a big component to it, is letting folks know what's available. A lot of cemeteries that is not available at, unless you like petition the township or petition the cemetery and, get it approved, because it's outside of what they're used to. Cemeteries are the ones that require the vaults. It's not a state law in most states. And so it would be the funeral home saying, this cemetery allows a natural burial. Is that an option that you wanted to do? Or did you have another cemetery for a traditional burial? Or, kind of going down different avenues, or maybe having different packages they can show right up front. Like, here's a cremation, here's a this, here's a that. I think just like with doing cremation, following a traditional visitation with like a rental casket, people don't really know that's always an option. They just think cremation means you don't ever view again, which is not the case. So I think it's really talking through the options before jumping to one or assuming a family wants one. I think if more people were given that option in front of them, they would do it if it was more available in cemeteries, and it was much more forthcomingly, if that's even a word, presented by the funeral home. So I think that's where you would see it become much more asked for and more popular than a traditional burial, because there are a lot of people who really like a more natural option.
Would you think a lot of the older funeral directors who have been doing this forever, do you think they would be okay with offering that, or do you think they would think that's silly?
I think there's going to be both sides to it. It's hard to retrain somebody to change how they present or what they present. There's a lot of funeral directors, just like cremation, people who worked before cremation was even really popular, and they almost have animosity towards it because it's a different price point. So I think a lot of that is changing your pricing structure as a funeral home, but it has to be every funeral home doing it. Otherwise, people are going to be going to different funeral homes for different reasons, even more so. I think as having a different pricing structure, which allows folks to choose their disposition based on just their choice, not on price level, because there's a huge stigma like, well, if they want direct cremation, I'm not making any money, or I'm making way less revenue, or how am I going to, subsist, keep my business going. without a traditional service. And so that's how I think some of the older generation, especially small funeral homes, where it is that one person maybe running the business, and they have a lot of stress for income and such based on choices. So I think that's where what would maybe drive some of wanting to offer or not offer.
Very good. Very good.
So
My
what's
second
number
question?
two?
The second question is, just like when I grew up, there were so many little local pharmacies, and now you just have the big box. It seems once in a while you still have a local one. But do you see that happening with the corporations coming in with the funeral homes too? Or do you feel like there's still going to be students graduating who their goal is to have their private funeral, their own small mom and pop funeral home?
I think this is right now is a generation of wanting to own their own things. People really want to be in control of their own future and their own destiny, and they don't really want to work for somebody because it's never going to maybe meet their needs. And so I think a lot of the young people coming out of school in every career want to go right to, they want to own their own, they want to be in charge, they want to do their thing. And I think it's the same way with a lot of funeral directors. It is a lot of times a one ownership, one person, or maybe 2 or 3 people, a business that there's not a huge staff and they are smaller. I think that the corporate has done some good service by, these really small town businesses that either they were going to close shop completely or they got bought out. And that allowed a nice retirement plan maybe for the people leaving when they didn't have anybody to turn it over to at the time. So I think that did help some businesses along the way, stay open and stay in business. And just because it's corporate doesn't mean it's bad. Just like independently owned, you're going to get bad and good. Just like family, just like everything, there's going to be good and bad on both sides of it. So I think that it's finding the means, finding the financials, and finding somebody that you can work with. I know several people who have, started washing cars and then eventually went to school and then came back and did apprenticeships, and that's the plan, is to turn the business over to that person. And that owner is working with those individuals saying, we can do a land contract, we can do this, we can do that. Because even me at 42, I can't just go into a bank and get enough I don't have enough capital to go purchase a, $3 million funeral home. Because when you're purchasing a funeral home, you're purchasing everything inside of that funeral home, not just a building. Like if you're buying a house, you're purchasing all the equipment, all of the vehicles, all of the pre-needs that are already there. So you're essentially purchasing future business that, contracts are written for. So you're taking on a lot when you're purchasing with all those additional things in it. So it's a much bigger valuation than just buying a house type thing. So it's finding the money to be able to do that. But when you have somebody who's an owner who works, through some, creative ways to do that with a person up and coming that's going to take over when they retire, it's great. They can create that relationship and create that turnover time. So I think then, that's good. But there's I know a lot of dreamers, a lot of people who are wanting and who want to have their own and who want to, I think maybe that they, there's some that have had a bad experience. And so they want to get a funeral home that they can run in the right way that they want to run it, to give good experiences to people that come through there. And so they have just this heart to invent, not, newly invent, but create a place that's doing what they maybe didn't get when they had an experience at a funeral home somewhere.
And I know around here, like you could read the obituaries, and if you see a surname, which funeral home they're going to be at, because a lot of them here, they go by your, they go to their ethnicity, where their family came from. Like the Italians go to one, when the Greeks go to another, Portuguese
the Polish go to one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which is always interesting that there's these regional, that you do that still. But when you've, for generational, gone to one funeral home, it's a big deal to it's like leaving your church you've generationally gone to, almost, to that, you've got to really break outside to go somewhere else, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Cool. So what's number 3?
My number 3 is, I would like to know, what's your favorite book on death, fiction and then nonfiction?
Oh. Somebody else asked me about kind of something similar to this, one of the viewers. And it's so hard. I've read several by, like, in the last year, newer, like Kevin Watts' book, The Dead Serious, which is sitting near me, which is why I'm looking over at it. Chelsea's book that she came out with last year. So I think there's some good ones. I really like Caitlin Dottie's first book, was really great. Not that the others aren't, but I really resonated with that one. It's that I love the stories of entering the business when you're first in it. And like, it takes me back to why I got into the business and all my firsts. And so it's kind of a walk down memory lane when I get to read those for other people. So it's always an interesting, I think, flashback for me reading those. But there's so many of them I haven't read, because I'd rather read about something I don't know about than about something that I do every day. Fiction and nonfiction. I don't know, fiction. Is there a fiction funeral home book? I do like, pardon?
Well, there's like books that death is in the storyline.
Oh, yeah. Like, I like books about forensic anthropologists or, pathologists, medical examiners, books like that, where there's drama and mystery, and there's, dead body in the middle of it, where they go to the, lab and they're doing or go to the pathology lab and they're doing the autopsies, and they're kind of talking through how they're figuring out and investigating through that. I like those. I love that kind of stuff. So, it started with Kathy Reichs and Patricia Cornwell back in the day. And now I like Karen Slaughter and, what's the lady? She writes the Rizzoli and Isles books, and they turned that into a TV show, but I didn't like who they picked for the characters. I think that's one of the things is, you read a book and then they turn it into a TV show, and it's like, ooh, that's not how I pictured that person. Especially if you've read, I think, a series, and then you're like, ooh, like Bones, the TV show. I had read a ton of Kathy Reichs books, and when I started watching the show, I really didn't like who they had picked. Over time, I grew to like her, and I grew to like the character that she created. But initially, I was like, nope, that's not how I pictured her. This is not working for me. But I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've ever read a funeral themed book that was nonfiction before. I'll have to think on that one. Maybe back in the day or something. When I was younger, I liked Christopher Pike books, which were like mystery and off the wall. And I feel like there's pictures still, when you're reading and you're envisioning it, pictures still that stick with me even now from reading his books long ago, because they were so vivid and so wildly, not twisted, but just, I don't know, they just made you think in a certain way. So his books were always good when I was younger. So what do you like to read?
I like to read, if you're asking about in the funeral business or death business, for nonfiction, I read a lot about the Civil War, Gettysburg, where they had to disinter men and then put them either into the National Cemetery or send them home. And
Okay.
I have a book, Gettysburg, The Aftermath of a Battle. It's called A Strange and Blighted Land.
Oh.
And that gives you a lot of information. So for nonfiction, I like things like that. For fiction, I've read chick flick novels about set in funeral homes. But one that's more on a serious note, it's fiction based on fact, was The Widow of the South. And this lady had, there was a battle right on her land in Franklin, Tennessee. And instead of having the boys where they were plowed over or whatever, she disinterred them all, and she created a cemetery on her land. She donated, I forgot how many acres. and because all these boys couldn't go home, or you didn't know who they were, and so she gave them a place to be honored. And I enjoyed reading that book.
Have you ever traveled to see that?
Not to Franklin. I've been to Gettysburg many, many times. And,
Okay.
I've gone to battlefields, but I do want to get out to Franklin, because you could tour the house there where she lived.
Wow.
And yeah.
That would be interesting. Is there like a cemetery there still?
Yes.
It's like a space marked off. Do you know?
It's you could visit the cemetery, I believe, and it's just rows and rows and rows of stone. And she kept a book, so whatever information she had on, let's say, plot 1, plot 2, plot 3, or whatever, she had it all written down. So I found that
Wow.
fascinating, to do
That
that
is,
all on her own.
that would be a good video, Dana.
Yeah,
I should
yeah,
go on a little travel to Franklin, Tennessee.
yeah,
Home of
yeah.
Saturn, at least it used to be the home of Saturn. The Saturn plant, the vehicle automotive
Oh, mm-hmm.
was down there. Huh. I'll have to look into that. That would be a really interesting kind of some historic stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've lent it to a friend, and she handed it back and said, "Oh no, Dana, this is too depressing for me." But I found it very interesting.
Well, our history of, our country is not all, roses and sunshine. So I think it's good to see some of that downfall to gets us where we're going. But
Yeah.
yeah, well, that's cool. I'll have to check that out. That would be a good one. So, well, thank you. Thank you for
You're welcome.
Connecticut. I've never been to Connecticut.
Oh, you have to come. I'll make you a nice Italian dinner.
Oh, little red
Ravioli.
wine, little pasta.
Yeah. Homemade.
Yum. I'll take it.
Okay, I'll be here. An hour out of Manhattan.
Perfect. I've never been to Manhattan either. Man, I'll just hit all the places. Very cool. Thanks so much, Dana. And thanks everyone.
Oh, my pleasure.
For joining us again on a Sunday. You guys are watching on a Sunday. I will post soon more states that we're looking for viewers to ask me questions from. So thanks, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.